Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast where if you invaded us, you'd be home by now, because this week we watched Under the Lake and Before the Flood.
Written by Toby Whithouse.
Directed by Daniel O'Hara.
And aired on October 3rd and 10th, 2015.
I think it's O'Hara, it might be O'Hara.
Oh, hurrah.
Oh, hurrah! Hurrah! Doctor Who is good again. I don't know.
Yeah, it is good again. This was a very solid two-parter. Probably, up there as among the best of the new series.
Wow, you're placing it really high up there.
Yeah, it's like a top 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, in case you missed last week's episode, we've changed up the format of the show a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean a little bit, like not a lot at all.
No, not a lot. Just a much-needed change. I mean, as soon as we stopped recording last week, a little behind-the-scenes info for you, we're like, man, why didn't we do this ages ago?
And we didn't really have an answer for that.
And here's the attempt number 2 where we get lulled into a false sense of security by how, seemingly well last week went. So this is the disaster, run or version of it.
Wow. Wow. Wow, no faith. Anyway, basically we plotted out where in the episode we're going to stop to talk about things. We actually planned ahead of time the things we're going to talk about instead of being like, well, I don't remember what I wanted to say. Or I don't remember what I wanted to reference here.
Or I don't remember what happened in the episode.
Yeah, because we make outlines now. So it's impossible to forget what happened.
Well, not impossible,
but,
just harder.
But harder.
Like a little harder.
And then once we finish with the summary, we have a couple of new segments to the show. We have the Sonic Screwdriver count, which we have on the website, but we're going to put in the actual episode. And then we have we just have kind of a quotes section where we think of our favorite, I guess, quotes from the episode.
Yeah, not necessarily from the episode, just in general. No.
Just in general. And then we end with the meme flow analog.
Oh, God. I still can't believe we decided to call it that.
Well, it's funny.
Well, actually, it's weird because memes, like as a concept, seem to be touched on a lot in this season.
Yeah, so far. A lot in this episode.
Maybe this is just your mind on memes.
Doctor Who on memes. So, the only production information this week that's fun, depending on your definition of fun, is that not the voice of the Fisher King, but part of the noises used for his roar, as well as the 12th Doctor hologram, was provided by Corey Taylor, the lead singer of Slipknot.
Yeah, and as a huge Slipknot fan, I'm personally
You are absolutely not a Slipknot fan.
No, I'm personally wearing my Slipknot mask right now as we record.
I'm getting incredible audio through that mask.
No, that's a blatant lie. In case you couldn't tell.
You really think people would do that? Just go on the podcast and lie? And that's it. That's all I found.
Yeah. In terms of how much we liked this episode, we kind of already touched on this, but a lot. I liked this a lot.
Yeah, I liked this quite a bit. It was really good, in my opinion. Really good.
I don't know if I would have liked this episode, story, whatever, as much if it wasn't right after season 8. Or, wait, 7? Are we in 8?
No, we're in 9.
We're 9. Okay. 8. I don't know.
I think I would have.
I think so
I don't
too,
even think season 8 was that bad, so I think I would have.
It was pretty bad. It was a major low point in Doctor Who history.
See, I still don't agree with that.
The only season worse than season 8 series 8 was season 7, I would say.
Really? You wouldn't put, Sixth Doctor's first season in there?
No.
Trial of a Time Lord?
No.
The season with the Merca and Black Orchid? You wouldn't put those down?
Black Orchid was great. I can't believe Brendan from Flight Through Entirety has Black Orchid as his least favorite Doctor Who story of all time.
Yeah, above the Massacre. The Massacre's bad enough to bring that season down to be worse than season 8, at least.
Anyway, into the actual plot of the episode.
Right.
This starts with a weird fourth wall breaking-ish scene.
Well, that's the second episode. First episode just starts with First episode is like pretty traditionally starts.
Doesn't it start with a doctor talking about how there's paradoxes all
That's
around us?
the second episode. Come on, man, you have an outline right in front of you.
Oh yeah. This one starts with some people on a base,
underwater base,
and they're looking at a ship. The ship is in the base.
Yeah, they kind of brought it on board, and the captain, Moran, is like, yeah, this is kind of weird. We just found this kind of out there.
Just kidding.
We kind of just found this out there on the, I guess, the seabed.
Yeah, this is taking place in 2119, November 21st, 2119 to be specific.
So close, yet so far.
Maybe we should kind of explain who these people are, because they actually have personalities and characters for once.
Yeah, so there's
Moran, who just dies right away.
Yeah, Moran dies like immediately, but we're not quite there yet. But there's Moran, the captain. There's Cass,
second in command. She becomes the captain after Moran dies.
Who is also
Captain Crunch.
Mute
and deaf.
Mute and deaf.
And there's Lun, who's her interpreter.
Right. And then there's
Bennett. I knew Bennett wasn't dead. Bennett from dang, what was that story called?
I know what you're talking about, but I don't remember what the story is.
We just mentioned it like a week or two ago. Damn it.
Don't know why I thought it was Galaxy 4 for a second here. I always forget Galaxy 4 exists, too.
It was something stupid like The Ploy or something like that.
Well,
as soon as we stop recording, we'll remember.
There's O'Donnell.
First story. Yeah, O'Donnell.
Who Bennett...
It's like a doctor fanboy.
Yeah,
fangirl.
Kind of. She's like Osgood, but not as annoying. And Bennett has like an implied crush on her that he doesn't act on.
Really? I didn't get that at all.
Wow.
No, that was Lun and Cass, I think you're thinking of.
But no, I'm not. Bennett has an implied crush as well because he tells Lun to tell Cass that he loves her because he's like, I never got the chance to tell O'Donnell.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Toby Whithouse going ham with these romantic subplots.
And then there's Pritchard, who's like the representative, I guess, from the oil mining company that's funding the sea base.
He's pretty like fundamentally, stereotypically, from a big oil company.
So that's the crew. And then there's the Doctor and Clara, obviously, because they land right now. I wrote that Clara's whinging about having an adventure.
Like dies. There's some sketchy stuff going on in the ship. There's some writing on the walls of the ship.
Right. Everybody goes in to look at it except for Lun.
Except Lun. Cass makes him stay out for some reason.
Oh, because she senses something sinister about the letters.
Yeah.
And she's right. But then the Doctor and Clara land, and
they sort of investigate. They walk around for a while. The Doctor discerns how long it's been since the incident by sticking his finger in a cup of coffee. Yeah,
because it kind of looks like the place has been abandoned. There's no one around. And Clara's complaining about this. She's like, I want to have an adventure. And the Doctor's like, this isn't an adventure enough for you. We're like underwater in an underwater base in the 22nd century and everybody's like gone. It's kind of weird.
Well, they run into the ghosts. The ghosts are pretty placid for the time being. We find out that the ghosts can only touch metal.
Yeah.
And then the ghosts lead the Doctor and Clara into the ship, and then they start trying to kill them.
Right.
After they see the writing.
Mm-hmm.
The Doctor wonders actually why the writing hasn't been translated by the TARDIS, but they don't figure that out for a while.
Yeah, and once they start trying to get killed, they run through the base.
Trying to get killed.
Run through the base, and
they run into this thing called the Faraday cage.
Right.
Which is where the rest of the crew is hiding out because the ghosts can't get in.
Which is a real thing.
Yeah, something to do with like the radio waves or something.
Yeah, Faraday cage doesn't allow electromagnetic waves to pass through the cage when the cage is complete, which is why it only works when the door to the room is closed, and that's why the ghosts can go in and out of the room as long as the door is open, but not when it's closed. And that's why it stops the ghosts, because I guess, spoiler, you find out later on the quote ghosts, unquote, are actually just electromagnetic projections, basically.
Yeah.
A Faraday cage is actually really simple. It has like no technical elements except it's basically just a cage of wire in a grid formation. It's like...
kind of like a Steadicam. You think it's professionally all done, but you can make a Steadicam for like $5. As long as you have a drill, I found out. A drill, like, if you don't have the drill, that's going to run you a little
It'll be like
more.
$300. Just rent one from Home Depot or something. Yeah, Faraday cage is like deceptively. It sounds like really technologically advanced, and it's just
a tinfoil hat.
kind of. That's actually the same principle behind a tinfoil hat and a Faraday cage. Same
5G's coming. Get ready. Get your tinfoil hats ready.
So
they're already here. No.
I don't know if 5G's already here. What was that whole thing with Trump being like, I've got 5G, guys, and everyone's like, no, you don't. But anyway, that's enough about that. The doctor and Clara get into the Faraday cage, and they're like, yeah, ghosts can't get in here. And the doctor was like, that's weird. Why is this room different from the rest of the base? And they're like, oh, it not only is it a Faraday cage, it's also lead-lined, we should mention, because the underwater base is nuclear-powered. And so the Faraday cage room is lead-lined because it was designed to be like a safe room in case the reactor, I guess, went critical.
Okay, hold on for a second. I didn't mean to stop here, and I didn't want to, but what is the base anyway? I mean, obviously they're investigating this mysterious ship that's on the base, but like, what is it? And like, what was it built for? What?
Drilling for oil.
Oh yeah, oil, I guess, because what's his face? Pritchard is there.
Because in this room, the doctor's like, you got the ghosts, we gotta figure out what's going on, and then we gotta like, basically abandon. Pritchard's like, I'm not abandoning this. I paid like hundreds of millions of dollars to mine for oil down here.
Right. This is after they've already gotten out of the cage, because it turns out the ghosts only show up when the base is in night mode. They have like an artificial day-night cycle, and the ghosts only show up at night.
Right. The doctor mentions, well, he's trying to figure out what the ghosts are, and he mentions that we're not in the nethersphere, that these aren't autons.
Wow. Thanks, Toby. So they go, the doctor and everyone else, they go and investigate the ship again, and the doctor learns a little more. He realizes one of the power cells is missing.
Right.
And he figures out, or like deduces that there should be like a stasis chamber for like the captain or the pilot of the ship.
Right.
But there's not. It's like mysteriously missing.
And
meanwhile, Pritchard decides that he needs to go find the power cell because it's worth a lot of money.
It's got a lot of energy. The classic Inferno line of reasoning. And while that's all happening, the Doctor and Clara go back to the TARDIS because the cloister bell is ringing. The Doctor's
Thanks,
like, that's
Toby.
weird. And the Doctor's like, well, we can fix this by just putting on the handbrake. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, the Doctor basically goes in and says, just going to turn off this alarm that's warning us to impending danger, not pending. The Doctor gets a little pissy at Clara. Clara is ready to go out there and be a hero and save the day, and the Doctor just wants to be number one all day, every day.
That wasn't exactly my interpretation of this scene. My interpretation of this scene is a little different than that.
We'll talk about interpretation later on in this episode. We're going to talk about Derrida.
Oh.
So just brace yourselves.
I already know what you're going to talk about.
Brace yourselves. Talk about ghost dance.
The good thing about the outline is now I already know what we're going to talk about going into the episode.
Yeah, it's like we're reading each other's minds.
Except not really. But then Pritchard comes back he's in the airlock. He's like, well, yeah. I didn't find the power cell. And then the ghosts flood the airlock and kill Pritchard.
Moran, we didn't actually mention that Moran is sort of with this other ghost who's wearing like a top hat and like a coattail type thing.
Yeah, he's a Tavolian from the God Complex.
Wow.
That memorable alien.
I didn't realize
Toby Whithouse introduced.
The God Complex is kind of like the Galaxy 4 of the new series. It's so not memorable. Or like, what was the one with the kid who there's
Night
an alternate Night Terrors, yeah. That's the one. Did Toby Whithouse write Night Terrors?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. Anyway, moving on, Pritchard gets killed by the ghosts.
And becomes a ghost. And in the main control room, everyone's kind of panicking because the base has gone into night mode, unprompted.
Yeah.
And they're like, what the hell's going on here? And then they're looking for Pritchard, and he's a ghost, and they're like, shoot.
So they run back into the Faraday cage, and Cass starts reading the ghost's lips because the ghosts are chanting something. And it turns out that it is the dark,
the sword, the Forsaken, the temple.
Right. I'm sure that doesn't mean anything.
Well, they eventually get out of the Faraday cage and they go to the kind of main room, and the Doctor deduces that the coordinates, basically, referring to basically exactly where they are right now.
Yeah.
Because the dark is space, the sword is the Sword of Orion, the constellation. Kind of weird that constellation would be named the same thing on a planet millions of miles across the galaxy on the opposite side of the constellation, because the Doctor mentions that if you view the constellation from the other side, Earth becomes the fourth.
Yeah, that's
the fourth
part
star.
of it. Yeah, that's how like Earth is involved, or that's how they're like calling attention to Earth, is that it's part of that constellation from that planet.
That was somehow still named like Orion, I guess. And the Forsaken is like,
it's like a church that nobody visited anymore or something. Oh no, that was a temple.
The temple. The Forsaken was like planet Earth.
Or wasn't it like the abandoned town or something?
Yeah, like the abandoned town because it was empty.
Yeah, the more we talk about this, the more this seems like a very Earth-centric like prophecy.
And then the temple, which is the church nearby.
Yeah, because we didn't mention actually that this base is next to a flooded town in Scotland. I guess Scotland is just at the bottom of the ocean 100 years from now. Good to know.
Well, this thing gets flooded in the 80s, as we find out in episode 2. But the one thing I wanted to mention here is they kind of deduce that the reason why the ghosts don't come out during the day, and it's only during the day on the base because the base is so deep, there's no light from the surface, so they have an artificial day-night cycle. And I think it's Cass mentions that, or it might be actually be O'Donnell, mentions that there's like constant checks going on like every second during day mode to like make sure everything is all right, but not during night mode. And she specifically mentions the life support system is like checked every second during day mode. I'm like, wait, why would you stop checking the life support system during night mode? You still need it, right?
Well, sleeping is kind of like dying, so you know when you're asleep it's almost like you're dead.
But I don't want to die in my sleep like in a preventable manner like this, where like
actually, there's a few things that we should probably touch on before we get to this point. Just mention real quick. They have this like kind of heartfelt conversation where they can all sort of leave. The ghosts are trapped, but they don't. They decide to stay on because they're all soldiers. Danny Pink, take note.
Well, except
Bennett.
Bennett is a scientist.
Yeah, Bennett wants to just leave.
He sticks around because he wants to know what's going on.
Yeah, Cass sort of guilt trips him into staying, honestly, but
Cass is staying because it's like her duty or whatever, because she's second in command, and now that Moran's dead, she's in charge.
Right. Lun is like, guess I'm staying then, guess the decision's made for me.
Yeah, because I'm the only one who can speak with Cass, because the Doctor claims he can speak sign language, but he actually can't because he deleted it.
Right, so here's the thing. They make it seem like they're going to have to go into subs and go into the city, but it's actually just a remote control sub, and that's how they sort of excavate the temple and get the stasis chamber out of the temple.
Right.
The Doctor says that he, it should be the pilot in the chamber, but he for some reason he thinks it's not. Little do we know who's actually in there yet.
Yeah, that's great.
They go back, before everything starts flooding, they go back to the ship to investigate the words again, and the Doctor realizes that these words actually change like the makeup of your brain so that you know what they say before you understand them.
Yeah, because the Doctor asks everyone if they expected what the message was going to be before Cass read their lips, and everybody raises their hands except for Lun. And the Doctor's like, that's interesting. So he looks at the words again, and he figures that the words implant the message in your brain so that when you die, you
still have them,
you still have it.
Whatever.
And then the Doctor also postulates / states as fact that the ghosts are a beacon sending out a message into space, calling people to Earth, and that the more ghosts there are, the stronger the message is. Which is why the ghosts showed the Doctor and Clara the words on the wall to embed them in the Doctor and Clara, and then they try to kill them.
Right. And they don't say this yet, but at this point you kind of get the idea that, okay, that's why they didn't kill Lun type thing. So.
But then the reactor starts going critical, and apparently the computer's response to this is to flood the base.
It needs to cool down the reactor, man.
Yeah, so its reaction is to flood the entire base.
I guess, like, I don't know, like, isn't the bottom of the ocean, like, pretty cool?
Yeah.
Unless you're next to like
A thermal
volcanic
vent.
like areas.
Yeah. I mean, I guess this would work. I question the computer's like sense of logic here.
Maybe the computer's like on the ghost side, just trying to kill everyone.
I mean, the computer's first priority might just be save all the technology because humans are expendable, which would be like the
Like the
first way that
Expendables.
malevolent AI would develop.
So yeah, the base starts flooding. They get split up.
Yeah, because they only have 30 seconds to get where they need to go before the corridor they need to get through gets flooded, and the doctor's like, let's get to the TARDIS because it's our only way out of here.
Gives you a real like good amount of time to get to safety. You know, freaking
30
base
seconds.
computer.
But then they get, split up because the corridor in between the two of them starts flooding. The doctor's like, I'll come back for you, Clara. And
I'm
she's
gonna
like, all right.
He tells Clara that he's going to time travel to the past and find out what's going on.
He wants to find out. He's going to time travel back to when the ship landed, basically, because he wants to know why it landed there and what's going on. So he's with Bennett and O'Donnell. Clara's with Cass and Lund.
Yeah, they're just kind of waiting around. Clara really trusts the Doctor, but then they see the Doctor's ghost outside the base. And that's how
It's this
episode one
ominous
ends.
cliffhanger. That's
Yeah.
great, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. This has more to it than your typical Doctor's gonna die cliffhanger.
Because the Doctor's already dead,
Yeah.
according to the cliffhanger. And then we go into episode 2, which then starts with the scene Keon mentioned earlier where the Doctor's like kind of breaking the fourth wall, but he never like explicitly breaks the fourth wall.
Oh yeah, I mean like he, especially at the end where he like turns to the camera and like shrugs, like beats me.
But basically he explains something that we've explained on the podcast like 10 times at this point, but we'll do it again because it's relevant to the story. But it's the bootstrap paradox. And the way the Doctor explains it is that Beethoven's biggest fan in the future is like, he's got a time machine and he wants to go back and meet Beethoven. He goes back and finds out there's no Beethoven. So he's like, what is he going to do? Because there's no Beethoven to sign his sheet music. But then since he brought all the music with him, he starts transcribing it by hand and then publishing it, and then he becomes Beethoven.
Yeah.
And the Doctor asks, so who wrote Beethoven's Fifth? And then he plays it on his guitar.
Yeah, really incorporating that whole Capaldi knows how to play guitar thing. Because we didn't mention that the intro theme actually has the guitar as part of it for just this episode.
In the second episode. I think I'm going to try use that version of the theme for this episode, but we'll see how well that goes. It's pretty cool. I mean, the guitar wasn't like intrusive. And
No, it wasn't it wasn't the like main part of the song. I don't know what you would call
the melody.
the melody, but it was like the backing like thing
Yeah,
part of the song.
basically like backing vocals almost. I think it worked really well. Anyway, this is where I want to stop to talk about some things.
Yeah.
So, I have two things I want to talk about. The first is I want to talk about the Doctor's, quote, duty of care, unquote, which he mentions to Clara, and which he kind of obliquely mentions when everybody else wants to stay behind. Because when he talks with Clara, my interpretation of that scene wasn't that the Doctor was like pissy that Clara was like getting all up in his business, but it was more that the Doctor was, after last week, more aware of both his own and Clara's mortality, and he wants Clara to stay in the TARDIS because he's like, look, things are getting hairy, and I don't want you to like basically A, get trapped in a Dalek, and then B, have me almost kill you like last week. So he's telling you about his duty of care and how he's responsible basically for her life, which is basically what Clara spent the entirety of Series 8 trying to get the Doctor to recognize that he was responsible for her life every time I guess Danny was trying to get the Doctor to realize, actually. And he kind of, again, like I said, obliquely references it when he tells everybody to leave because he's like, look, I want you guys to leave. Like, you're going to get in the way. You're probably going to die. So, like, I want you to leave. But you'll never know what's down here.
Yeah, I kind of buy that. I would buy that more if the Doctor didn't immediately go into lines of like, being around me should make you 10 times cleverer by osmosis and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah.
That was at a different part of the episode, though.
It was like kind of right after.
It was when they were talking. That was when they were talking about the constellation, which was before he tells them all to leave.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know. He just seems very full of himself in this episode.
Well,
Especially
we also
at the
forgot
end
to
where
mention
he, like,
Clara and his
really,
like flashcards.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I want to mention that in the quotes section because I wrote down all of the flashcards as quotes.
Yeah, so that was the first thing I wanted to talk about. 'Cause I think it's interesting how he's I think, come to realize that he's like responsible for Clara's life at this point and try to take precautions against getting her killed.
I guess.
And the other thing I wanted to talk about was the fourth wall breaking by the Doctor. Because I think this is, I think, the first time the Doctor has implicitly broken the fourth wall since the
Feast of Stephen.
The first Doctor turns to the camera and goes, "And a very Merry Christmas to all of you at home." And I think it's an interesting choice. I actually surprisingly don't have.
Thanks, Toby.
I actually surprisingly don't have a problem with it, basically at all. I actually think it's an interesting way to start the second episode because I think it sets up what are the thematic through lines of the second episode.
Kind of, yeah. The Doctor tells you to Google it. So here's the thing. Here's my question about all this: is the Doctor calls this? He says it's called a bootstrap paradox. Google it. I've never heard this called a bootstrap paradox except by Doctor Who, and in the context of Doctor Who.
Oh, I've only ever heard it called the bootstrap paradox. Interestingly,
I've just heard it called the paradox or impossible object or something like that.
I've always heard it called the bootstrap paradox. So
yeah, I mean that's obviously from something about bootstraps.
Yeah,
I don't know what the whole story is.
I'm sure you could Google it.
Yeah, I didn't Google it. That's why
I should put it in the show notes.
Taking the Doctor's advice.
And it's interesting because at the end of the episode, there's a kind of a moment where the Doctor turns to the camera almost, and he doesn't wink, but he shrugs. He shrugs. It kind of feels like he's winking to the audience, like we know.
Well, he asks Clara, but it's like he's asking you, where did the idea come from? Turn the camera and shrug, type thing.
Right.
So, I had some stuff I wanted to talk about here, too. Let's talk about memes.
I even wrote down something in here. Is it a memetic thing in one of my notes?
Yeah, so, I'm going to have more to say about memes later on. I think the second episode really throws a wrench in all of this and kind of changes everything up. But, at this point, it really seems like the ghosts are passing on memes, passing on this info. But not really, right? Because, this is supposed to be writing. But it's more genetic. It rewires your brain. It's more
genes and memes.
It's more, yeah, no, it's more of a gene than it is a meme. If it is either of those, which it's not.
It's both. You might say it's a hybrid.
Oh my god. Yeah, I just find it interesting that writing or whatever, the thing they thought was a meme of you see this writing and it's in your mind, but it's actually on the physical level in your brain. It rewires your brain.
It's almost the contrast between what you comprehend and where you comprehend it in your brain, right? You comprehend these words on the wall, but it's really just electroneural signals in your brain just firing when you read these things. What is consciousness?
Yeah, I also want to touch on the traditional nature of this episode. It feels kind of detective-esque, where the Doctor's and they make reference to this in the dialogue of we need information. The Doctor's gathering information. The more information he has, the better off he is. Mm-hmm. And the ghosts are doing the same thing too. They're learning how to interact with their environment using metal and to mess with people and kill people. So the more information they have, the better off they are. And it's very conventional. Very conventional in that way.
Well, it's very classic Who, where the Doctor comes in, he doesn't know what's going on, and he actually has to figure out what's going on, without any information.
Yeah, I didn't say that. That's what I meant. That it's very, conventional in the sense of, it's classic Doctor Who.
Yeah, because New Who, I guess, had this thing where the Doctor, always knew what was going on, because he was so old at that point. It was there's basically nothing I can
not know.
And he even explicitly makes reference to this in the first episode where he has this kind of clunky line, I think. But anyway, where he's I hate it. I love it. I want to kiss it to death. Because he doesn't know what everything is. And he's just I love not knowing. It's so much fun, basically.
Yeah, episode 2 kind of, again, complicates this a little. But I just wanted to mention that now.
Episode 2 is the New Who twist on the classic Who formula that episode 1 was.
Anyway, so into episode 2, we see the Doctor again. He's floating outside. He's a ghost. And the Doctor and Bennett and O'Donnell have gone back to 1980.
Right.
To Russia. No, it's just Scotland. It's just a town designed to look like a Soviet like town, I guess, to prepare to go to war.
Yeah, the doctor says they performed training maneuvers in these little towns in the Cold War in case they needed to invade the USSR to, I guess, get some practice.
I mean the CCCP?
Same thing. When I saw this, when I first watched it, I was like, man, you know what would be a really cool episode of Doctor Who is if there was like a Soviet atomic bomb testing site. You know, and they always had those mannequins to like test the effect of the bomb on like people inside the houses. I'm like, what if it was like an atomic bomb testing site where all the mannequins were autons? That would be great. But then that never happened.
I mean,
so.
you'd have to like throw some more twists and folds into that story.
Oh, I always thought it would be like the twist would be that it's set in like Soviet Russia. And there was like the fourth Doctor lands and the Brigadier's like, yo, since UNIT's a worldwide organization, we're going to have to send you into the Soviet. We're going to have to send you into the communist bloc. And the Doctor's like, but they're communists. And the Brig's like, well, we don't have a choice because we're a unit.
Well, here's what would be cool of like highlighting, you know, the similarities between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, you know, way back when, maybe still today, of like they land and they think it's a U.S. bomb testing site, but then they find out that it's being run by the Russians.
See, there's so many cool things you could do with this idea. But I never developed the plot any further than that, and I like forgot about it because I had to try to keep up with the rest of Doctor Who. Yeah, there's a big painting of Lenin, I think it is, on the side of one of the walls, and you're like, man, these Scots really went all out with this.
John Lennon. Just kidding. Soviet leader John Lennon.
Back in the USSR, it was secretly propaganda. Anyway.
That is like a weird song, actually. Like, it's written from the Russian point of view.
Yeah, and it's also supposed to be like a Beach Boys song. Like, the Beatles were like, we're going to try to emulate the Beach Boys sound with the song. Then they wrote it about the USSR, which is like why it's like kind of a weird song and why I kind of really like it.
Their sound, I mean, regardless of what they themselves thought or think, their sound is like pretty similar to the Beach Boys regardless.
Yeah, but not always.
No, they really switched it up. They really made some weird turns like later on in the career of the Beatles.
Well, after they all went to India and did LSD.
Yeah, you know, all the Beatles songs that, you know, I thought I liked as a kid turned out to be by Wings, so...
Well, that's weird.
the like cash-in Beatles band that Paul McCartney started after the Beatles.
Yeah. Anyway.
Still alive and kicking. Ringo Starr's still making music. I don't know if you knew that.
I did, but he also has the most wholesome Twitter account of anyone on Twitter. So he always ends his tweets with peace and love, everybody, peace and love. He's bringing some positivity to the cesspool that is Twitter.
But I don't know, that entire vibe is like passed the world by and he just hasn't moved on.
Yeah, maybe that's a good thing. Caught up with the
vitriol and sarcasm and narcissism
and maybe that's a good thing. And maybe that's a good thing.
No, I don't think so. He's stuck in the past. Get on with the times, Ringo.
We got to learn from our past to make a better future, and Ringo's here to help us make it happen.
Anyway, they start exploring the town, and the ship is just there.
Yeah,
it's just parked.
O'Donnell mentions that they're in 1980, which is like pre-Harold Saxon, and also pre-quote the Minister of War unquote. Spoilers: we never find out what she's referring to with this statement. Really? Not even in the books. We literally never find out.
Minister of War, isn't that referring to something we've seen?
No, because the doctor even explicitly goes, he's like, what is that? And he's like, no, wait, don't tell me. I'll find out soon enough.
Maybe it was from books. Who knows?
Nope. Not in a book, not in a TV show. Never find out. So you can let your imagination run wild. Could be anything. Yeah, so he's like, don't spoil it for me. She has like a fangirl moment about the TARDIS actually being bigger on the inside. And Bennett's just like, yeah. Bennett was like throwing up after his first time travel voyage, and the doctor's like, that's all right. People do that.
Yeah, he ate a prawn sandwich, and I don't know, the combination, I don't know why this sickens me, but like shrimp and bread together. Shrimp in general is like, it's okay. But I mean, it's really just like water bugs that you're eating, essentially.
You're on your own with this one, unfortunately.
I mean, I eat shrimp. Like, it's good.
Yeah, and I don't.
It's like when you really think about it, though, it's like, yeah.
I mean, humans eat some weird things.
Yeah,
Pigs especially.
Like balut or
snails.
Yeah, escargot.
Foie gras, which is like extremely unethical in my opinion, but anyway.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
Isn't it just like raw meat or something?
No.
People eat that like a lot.
No. I don't exactly know how to explain foie gras, except that to get it, they basically overfeed geese. Like force feed geese.
Well, that's what they do with factory farms anyway, so.
Yeah. Partially why I just don't eat any meat at all.
Anyway, they go to the ship. They meet up with another Tavolian.
Well, the Tavolian that's in this episode. His name is Prentice.
Yeah, Prentice.
He's an undertaker.
He sort of has some funny dialogue, which is okay, I guess.
It explains how on Tivoli their capital has a sign that says, "If you occupied us, you'd be home by now." And he basically explains that he's carrying the Fisher King to his final resting place. And the Fisher King ruled the Tavolians for 10 glorious years, apparently.
The Fisher King is like something from mythology. I don't really know exactly what, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
They're just
either.
using his name in this story. I'm sure there's some connection. If I actually like looked up and knew what this was a reference to, I'm sure the connections would be made apparent.
Oh, well. That massive marathon of movies we did yesterday probably made that an unattractive option.
Let's just pause and talk about that for a second. So we watched all the extended editions of The Lord of the Rings yesterday. And, at the end of those movies, Frodo and Sam come back to the Shire, but nobody in the Shire, understands what they've been through. And I felt like that. Like, when you come out of an experience like watching Lord of the Rings for 11 and a half hours, like, you come back changed. Like, I went back home and I lived with my mom, so, she was there. And she was like, so, hey, welcome back. Like, how was it? And I was like, this is just an entirely different headspace. Like, I'm not, how was it? Like, I didn't say any of this. I was just thinking it. I was like, how was it? I can't even begin to describe. I feel like I've been in there. I felt like I'd been in there for years. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised if I walked out and, the world was a different place.
The podcast has moved on without you. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that must have made watching Doctor Who after that, a completely different experience. I had watched Doctor Who before Lord of the Rings, so it didn't really affect my viewing of this episode.
Yeah, I just felt like what Frodo and Sam probably felt like coming back to the Shire. Like, no, man, nobody understands what I've just gone through.
Just completely zoned out.
Trauma.
Is this your lead up to you're going to be like Frodo and you're leaving the podcast? You're like, I'm leaving and I'm moving on. I just guessed. Nobody understands.
The podcast was Middle Earth all along. Rendering the Fourth Age. This is what all these changes are leading up to. No, I'm not leaving the podcast yet.
Yet?
Sure, it'll happen someday, but today's not that day.
Yet.
Anyway, back on track.
Back on the base, Clara gets a phone call from the doctor because the doctor calls her up and he wants to tell her what's going on. And Clara and Cass and Lund have figured out that the doctor hologram is saying a different string of words. He's saying a list of names, and it goes Prentice, Moran, Pritchard.
No, yes, Moran, Pritchard, Prentice.
Oh yeah, Moran, Pritchard, Prentice,
O'Donnell,
Clara, the doctor. Bennett Lund.
Yeah.
Bennett Cass Lund.
Whatever, yeah.
And the doctor's like, that's interesting.
I'm surprised they don't figure this out yet, but eventually they do figure out that's a list of the names in the order they died.
Well, the doctor does figure it out, and Bennett calls him out on this because
Yeah, because O'Donnell dies, actually.
Because Clara goes into the Faraday cage because the ghosts are chasing her, and the doctor says, leave your phone outside because the phone signal won't get inside the Faraday cage. And when you see it ring, then pick it up because it'll be me and I'll be telling you what's going on. And then as they try to leave the TARDIS, the doctor tells O'Donnell to stay behind. And she's like, hell no, as if. And then Bennett is like, yeah, maybe you should stay behind. She's like, no, I'm not staying behind. Like, you can't stop me. And they go out and she gets
killed
by the Fisher King.
And her ghost shows up in the future and steals the phone.
And Bennett calls the doctor out. He's like, you knew she was going to die, right? He's like, you figured out that it was a list of people who were going to die. Like, why didn't you try harder to stop her? And he's like, well, I did try. And he's like, yeah, but you didn't really, did you? You wanted to know. You wanted to test your theory and confirm that it actually was a list of people who were going to die, right? And he's like, now you're going to actually try, because the next name on the list is who? The doctor's like, Clara. And he's like, yep, exactly.
Dang, Bennett's throwing down some truth.
Yeah. Bennett's the Rory of this episode.
So they get back into the TARDIS to try and leave, but they can't. They just wind up 30 minutes back in the past.
And they got Back to the Future to themselves.
Yeah, they watch themselves interacting with Prentice and, the Fisher King and all of that. The Fisher King and Stasis. And Bennett wants to reveal themselves and try and stop everything and change everything. But the doctor says, no, they can't do that. I had this as a quote. I guess I'll save it for the quote section. Because the more we I'll just say it here type thing, the more this will all just fall apart. So I'll just save it for the quote section.
Yeah, so in the future, Clara comes up with this plan to get the phone back, where she sends out Lund because they didn't try to kill Lund earlier because he doesn't have the words in his head. Yeah,
we kind of skipped the entire chase scene, but it was really well done. It was pretty intense. And it was good. I really liked it. And
this chase scene or the other chase scene that we skipped?
The one in episode 1 where you find out that the ghosts aren't going to kill Lund. I really liked that scene because not only was it intense, edge of your seat action type thing, it was you find out more Lund isn't, susceptible to ghost death. The ghosts aren't going to kill Lund, essentially.
Also, we should mention that chase scene in episode 1 because it sets up the hologram emitter because they use a Clara hologram to trap the ghosts in the Faraday cage. The reason why they did this is because the doctor wanted to communicate with the ghosts. This is before he figured out that they were all saying the same thing, that they cast in lip reads for them.
Right.
But then, in the past, I guess, the doctor confronts the Fisher King. He's like, you're basically just stealing people's souls to turn them into messages. And he's like, yeah, one day there'll be so many of them that the signal will be powerful enough to call my race here and we'll conquer this world. The doctor's like, I'm not going to let that happen. And he's like, yeah, but you're basically already dead. You'll be dead, soon.
The doctor tells the Fisher King, I think, that, I already erased the writing on the walls
he does.
Something like that.
He says, my note says the doctor bamboozles him by claiming he removed the words, but he didn't.
So the Fisher King goes to check, and the doctor is actually the one who stole the power cell.
Right.
He used it to blow up the dam and kill the Fisher King.
And O'Donnell has gone back to the TARDIS, and while this is all going on... Sorry, Bennett. While this is all going on, the stasis pod is, opening up in the base, and you're like, oh, shoot, the Fisher King's going to come out and kill them all.
And then that's when you find out the Fisher King gets washed away by the flood, and the doctor pops out of the case.
Yeah, he pops out, and Clara's just they're all standing there. That's just where Clara was at that moment. And the doctor pops out, and he's like, surprise, it's me. Also, we see a doctor hologram in the TARDIS when Bennett gets sent back to the base, the TARDIS auto return program or whatever. And then the doctor's like, yeah, so problem solved.
Yeah, they kind of wrap this up really neatly. The ghosts are going to get carved out of the base by UNIT and just sent into space where they'll die. Cass and Lund get together.
Yeah, because, like I said, Bennett tells Lund to tell Cass that he loves her because he didn't get a chance to tell O'Donnell.
Right. And that's pretty much that.
Then they make out. And then Clara gets back into the TARDIS. And then the doctor's like, so I only made the hologram because I knew it was a hologram, and I put your name next because it would help me figure everything out. Also, the doctor's message changes at some point. He says, I think the case is opening or something like that, which is referring to the stasis pod, which keys the doctor in to get into the pod. The doctor says he only programmed the hologram to do all that because he knew already that the hologram did that. And Clara's like, yeah, so you had a pretty smart idea. And he's like, but when did I come up with the idea? Because I only did it because I saw it. I only saw it because I did it. And Clara's like, well, you, and this is when the doctor just kind of shrugs to the audience.
Yeah, he says, so where did that information come from?
End of the episode. Next time on Doctor Who, Vikings.
Is this the time meddler all over again?
Some people consider just before we end the episode, I just want to note here, some people consider the next 2 episodes to be like 2 separate one-part stories, but I think they're pretty much like when you watch them, you're like, yeah, you kind of have to watch these like with a 2-parter in mind because they're it is a continuation of the same story. So,
I mean, this is kind of like, I guess I haven't watched it, but I'm guessing the sound. What was it?
It's kind of like Utopian, the Sound of Drums.
Yeah.
Where the second part of the story takes place in like a completely different time, but like all the characters are the same and it like continues the plot thread. So
right, just a location change, not really a separate thing.
Right.
Anyway, I have some stuff I want to talk about here at the end.
So do I. You want to go first this time?
Sure. Why not? So this episode is actually really interesting in terms of like the creation of ghosts. So there's this field of like study that Derrida created called hauntology, as like a play on words with ontology.
Nice.
And there's this movie, this weird movie called Ghost Dance that came out in 1983, and Derrida's in it. They decide to interview Jacques Derrida, for the movie, and they just keep like the full interview, I think, unedited in the movie. And they ask him if he believes in ghosts, and he totally like breaks the fourth wall and stuff, and they just keep it in the movie. And he gets, it's in his office, and he just gets a call in the middle of the interview, and he just takes it, and it's in the movie, and it's him like scheduling a real appointment like with some guy, or like it's him letting some guy into a seminar that's closed. But essentially, what they're asking him is if he believes is like, do you believe in ghosts? And weirdly enough, he says, well, I'm a ghost, and you're a ghost, and that guy you just called on the phone is a ghost. Because like within hauntology and like for Derrida, communication technology actually creates ghosts. And I think that's a little bit present in this episode because the creation of ghosts in this hauntological type thing has to do with like temporality, like not reverse, but like mismatched like time, as if time's going like in the wrong order. So, I mean, essentially, as far as I understand it, what Derrida says is that, when you communicate without technology, just like normal, like face-to-face communication, there's 3 phases of it. So like, for example, I'm sitting here communicating with Dylan. So like step 1 is me, like my physical self. Step 2 is the message I'm giving out. And step 3 is Dylan, who's sitting right here, who's listening to all of this. That's like the normal like flow or like the normal non-technological communication. But like what communication technology does, whether it's writing on stone tablets or Instagram, whatever it is it takes part of that equation out. So like, for example, when I'm communicating with you, you, the listener of this podcast, part of that equation isn't there. So from my point of view, like I'm originating, I'm step 1. Step 2 is my message, but step 3 isn't there yet. You're in my future.
Yeah, it's time delayed.
and from your point of view, I'm not there. My message is coming before me. So this is why like writing for Derrida is kind of the creation of ghosts, because it confuses like the debut, quote unquote, like the debut with the return. It's a return that shouldn't be that shouldn't happen, because step 2 becomes step 1, right? I'm not there for you. All you have is my step 2, my message.
Kind of separates the message from both ends of the equation.
Yeah, and that's why he goes on.
Exists without.
Yeah.
That reminds me of 2 things. It reminds me of the Idiot's Lantern, where the people got stuck in the TV, and then they became, quote, ghosts, unquote, in the TV. But more importantly, it reminds me of Silence in the Library, where people become data ghosts in the little recorder.
Yeah, definitely.
Before they die, and then their existence in the data recorder continues on after they die.
Right. So because of this confused temporality, this return that should have like never happened, it should have never been, a return, I guess, or yeah, I'm getting confused now. But anyway.
Well, it gets weirder if you were the only host on this podcast and I wasn't here, then you wouldn't even be communicating with me as well. Your message would actually just be going out into the void. You'd basically be talking to yourself, but then people would be listening later
There are podcasts like that with just one person.
Of course.
So yeah, in this whole like configuration, the thing that comes, what should come second is what you're getting first, like the message, right? You don't get the person, you get the message before that. So there's this line actually, and we're not at the quote section yet, but I have to mention it now for what I want to say, where the doctor is trying to stop Bennett from introducing himself or like intervening in the past. And he goes, the Doctor Who wiki actually gets this wrong. I know because I watched the episode and wrote it down as I was watching. They got the quote wrong.
Fix it and improve the wiki.
I guess. What the Doctor says is that you can't just go back and cut off tragedy at the root because you find yourself talking to someone you just saw dead on a slab, because then you really do see ghosts. And the Doctor's talking about the creation of ghosts in terms of like reverse temporality from his point of view, like meeting someone out of order. Mm-hmm. But I think it's the opposite. I think they would turn themselves into ghosts, right? Where they're what should come second for them, like they're themselves in the future, that should be second for, like, if they were to introduce themselves to O'Donnell, that should be second after, what comes. God, this is hard to explain. Like, what comes in between them going back to the past should be first, not them, not their future selves. But I
mean, I think it's both ways. I think they both get turned into ghosts.
Sure, yeah.
Because when you talk to yourself, that's for you, the younger version of you meets the older version of you, and now the older version of you is meeting the younger version of you. So you're meeting yourself for the second time, even though you've already been through this experience as the younger version of you. But then for the younger version of you, you're meeting the older version of you, like out of step with the flow of time.
Yeah,
if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's confusing, right? I think the key to this is that it's a debut, it's a debut that should be a return.
Okay. Yes.
Because if they were to introduce themselves again, just to use this as an example, to O'Donnell, that should have come later, but it's coming now. Mm-hmm. They're all out of order. So I think the doctor doesn't say this, but I think they would really turn themselves into ghosts. So maybe instead of because then you really do see ghosts, it should be maybe because then you really do be ghosts. Turning themselves into ghosts. And yeah, that's just pretty much all I wanted to say. Just I think Derrida's like theories and kind of help explain like this whole turning people into ghosts when they're still alive type thing. Mm-hmm. Because the reason I guess in this movie why he says like, the guy on the phone who just called me was a ghost, he's never met the guy. He's getting his message before him type thing.
Yeah.
And like when he says I'm a ghost in the movie, we've never met him. Probably you've never met him.
Probably.
You're getting his like cinematic. You're getting him on the screen before you've met him. His message on the screen before the actual person.
Mm-hmm. Huh. Interesting. Yeah. Well, what I wanted to talk about is not nearly as interesting. I wanted to talk about two smaller things. The first thing I wanted to talk about was quote representation unquote, because Cass is the first explicitly deaf, I guess, protagonist in Doctor Who, unless you can come up with one right now, because I don't think there is one before Cass.
I don't think so.
And
at least I'll say not in the. If we're forgetting someone, I don't think the person we're forgetting is like in the type of role that she's in. They're probably just like sidelined or something.
Yeah, which is why I explicitly use the word protagonist.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know, I think it was a good choice to put someone on screen in a protagonist role who is not typically seen in a protagonist role. And not only that, they have like a special skill to contribute to the table that like helps save the day. She can read lips, so she's able to figure out what the ghost is saying, which helps save the day. And that's really all I wanted to say about that, was that it was pretty cool. But the bigger thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that Toby Whithouse puts a lot of references to other stories in these two episodes, much like I guess Moffat did last week with, which is familiar, Magician's Apprentice.
They're haunting us. These past stories.
They are kind of ghosts.
Let them go.
They're like never-ending memes that occur throughout.
Oh my god.
Doctor Who is incredibly self-referential and exists within itself. It's weird. But anyway, Toby Whithouse puts in all these references, and I just wanted to like go through a couple of them. Like I said, he mentions the autons in the nethersphere. There's a magpie electricals reference because the Doctor's amplifier is a magpie electricals amplifier. O'Donnell talking about Harold Saxon and the Minister of War, which is kind of the opposite of a reference. It's like a call forward because we don't know what it is yet. When I watch, it's like, oh, we're going to find out what that is, like next season or something. Like it's Stephen Moffat planting the seeds of the future.
Hey, maybe it's still coming. We don't know.
It could still be, but it's like a reverse reference almost because it's a reference. See, that's also
like deja vu.
It's kind of like a ghost as well because, like, for I guess O'Donnell, she's like already lived through the Minister of War.
Yeah,
but
that
the
is
Doctor like hasn't. We haven't as an audience.
Yeah, that's totally like the ghosts from Hauntology. God, that name is so stupid, but that's totally like the ghosts from Hauntology, right? We're getting this like totally out of order.
Yeah,
it should be it should be a reference, but it's not. It's the debut of the Minister of War.
Yeah, and then also with the Tavolian alien, just talking about him being invaded. The Doctor hologram is almost a reference to the Ninth Doctor's hologram when he takes Rose away at Bad Wolf, Parting the Ways with Donna.
Bad Wolf.
And it's just, there's a lot of references in this, a lot of callbacks, call forwards that Toby Whithouse is doing, like last week. And I'm starting to wonder if that's going to be like a theme for this season, is like the interconnectedness of the Doctor's adventures.
Well, it does seem like memes are a huge part of this season.
Yeah, and I guess that goes along with all these other adventures the Doctor's had, or other aliens, or other things the Doctor's experienced being referenced or called back to, or homaged, or whatever whatever word you want to use.
Ripped off, plagiarized, done again poorly, whatever you want to call it. That actually, I think that I just kind of glossed over this, or I didn't mention it, but it kind of goes back to this something that the Fisher King says to the Doctor, which is that the Doctor is still slavishly trying to protect time, which is actually interesting in the context of all of this. If you think of it in the sort of the context of like the Doctor's trying to keep time all linear, right? He doesn't want Bennett to intervene. He wants to he doesn't want to create ghosts, but the Fisher King is like messing with time and creating ghosts. Yeah,
and he says this to Bennett too, because Bennett's like,
Bennett tries to pop out and be like, guys, here's what's going to happen.
He says in a different way to Bennett too, because like, all of this has already happened. Like, O'Donnell has already died because I have the message in me that says that she died. I've already died because we know I'm a ghost. We've seen my ghost, so I'm basically a dead man walking. Like, I can't change that. Like, I already know I'm dead. So.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, that's all I had.
Yeah, I've sort of one more thing. Also on the topic of Derrida, because I was thinking of this essay he wrote called Signature Event Context, which is where some of this stuff is kind of coming from. And then I remembered a quote from that, or like what this paper, or I don't know if it's a paper, essay, I guess, is all about, Signature Event Context, is it starts with the question, is there a meaning to communication other than the communication of meaning? And it just spirals out of control from there.
It's already out of control.
Well, he answers it in the first paragraph, which is yes.
All right, good. So I stopped reading right there.
But yeah, it just spirals out of control from there. But I'm wondering if the words, in this story are actually writing, because I don't think they are. I don't think this is actually writing. What Derrida says in Signature Event Context, and keep in mind that this might be a quote. He might be quoting someone else. I don't know if these are his words or him quoting someone, but I'll link the whole thing in the show notes because you can find it online, and I'll give the answer there. But here's what he says. A written sign is one that does not exhaust itself in the moment of its inscription. It can give rise to an iteration beyond the presence of the empirical subject who produced it. Writing breaks with the collectivity of presences that organize the moment of its inscription, its context. The sign remains readable even after its producer and its moment of production are irrevocably lost. One can perhaps come to recognize other possibilities by inscribing it into other contexts. And that made me kind of question, if you're going by this, is this writing in this story actually writing? Because there's no possibility of this writing to go into other contexts. As soon as you see the writing, it rewrites your brain so that you know what it means.
I guess, but going along, one of the other things he says writing is that it exists beyond its creator irrevocably coming back, basically. The Fisher King eats it 50 years before any of these people read this inscription, basically, which means that it exists long beyond its use because the Fisher King, like, call the people there. Fisher King's dead. They're not going to invade the planet because they got nobody to lead them.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. Like, I don't know if it exists long beyond its use, because its use is still the same as what the Fisher King intended it for it to be. It's always going to be the same because it literally, like, hijacks your brain into making you, know the same thing every single time. There's no, again, like he says, iterability to it. There's no, because one of the things I think Derrida, he might just be quoting someone, goes into in this is that, like, writing is a code. And so a code, regardless of its context and its meaning, is still a code. So, for example, you could take English orthography, English alphabet, English letters, and that's still a code, regardless of whether you use it to speak English or not. So, like, millions of years in the future, when English is forgotten, you could take English letters, and that could be a whole other language. So it's a code, regardless of whether you're using it for its intended, language or not, type thing. And that sort of is for Derrida what all writing is. Which made me question, like, if this writing is being used for the same purpose every single time, hijacking people's brains malevolently every single time, is it really writing? I don't know. I would say no for now, but...
I mean, the Doctor uses it to figure out who the Fisher King is, though, which I guess is not its intended purpose.
Yeah, that's true. So that is sort of like a meta, like, contextual purpose, in a way.
It's the continuation of Moffat's Don't Do Things stories. This is the Don't Read story.
What can we do, Moffat? For the love of God, we can't blink.
We can't listen.
We can't listen.
Can't read. We can't forget. or don't forget, yeah. There's a silence. Shouldn't forget.
Moffat is just using Doctor Who as a vehicle to, like, secretly turn everyone into vegetables.
I can't remember what we said last Christmas was either. Don't dream. Don't think. That's what it was. Yeah, don't think.
Jesus. God, Moffat, can you give us one thing that, like, we can do, please?
Travel in time.
Yeah, travel in time and get confused.
Oh, man. Well, so speaking of traveling in time, sonic shades.
What? What does that mean? Is that, like, we traveled through time, we started with the screwdriver, and now we're at the shades?
It was just a nonsensical segue, I'm going to be honest. Didn't mean anything.
Well, it exists beyond its intended meaning, so I'm going to go with that. What did you have?
Turning off Holoclara. Streaming the Doctor's vision to the screen when he's communicating with the ghosts. Trying to analyze the written words. Calling the ghosts away. I don't remember what that was. And removing the words from the brains.
Yeah, I had... transmitting the video and beaming the holograms, which you also got in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, so using them for quite a few things, this story.
Well, he uses them to remove the words from the brain at the end, which I think would have been much more difficult with the screwdriver, because you would have had to, like, point it and stuff. But with the shades, you just put them on and it just removes them from your brain.
Yeah, should we, trust your doctor, classic off-the-cuff deciding... what we should do on recording? Do you think we should, like, rate the sonic shades / screwdriver? Like, how well were they used? How well did it integrate into the story, or was it just like a Deus Ex Machina type thing?
Oh, and I guess their use this week was
pretty good, pretty high up there.
Pretty good. Was a lumberjack's axe. A lumberjack really needs an axe or a chainsaw to cut down a tree, so it was pretty useful. Is my determination. I guess I'm ranking it like I rank those Blake 7 episodes.
Yeah.
One season, Series C, I think we did that.
Yeah, we'll go with that. I'm not going to think of mine because we'll have to do 2 every episode, and we'll run out more quickly. But yeah, I say they were pretty useful, and I think that's partially due to the fact that the hologram stuff was set up before they used it to get out of, the big deal at the end of the episode.
Yeah, they didn't just pull it out of
thin air. So I guess that brings us to the final segment, the meme flow analog.
You're skipping the quotes.
Oh, right.
Which is important because you explicitly said you were going to say them at the end.
Yeah.
To preserve the format.
I already said the ones I was going to say at the end, but I have more.
I've only got 2.
All right, so just, yeah.
My first one is Clara going, not with me, you die with whoever comes after me, which is incredibly entitled. And I was just like, wow, Clara, you really staking a claim on the doctor's life here.
Yeah, I felt that Jenna Coleman probably didn't like that line either because of the way she delivers it. Maybe that's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of got that vibe as well. It's like that epitome of the toxic relationship I guess Clara is developing with the doctor. She's like, you're not allowed to die. He's like, but I'm already dead. The hologram's right there. And she's like, no, change it. And then my other quote is, this is a really interesting one, I think, because the doctor is talking with the Fisher King. He's talking about how the Fisher King steals people's futures to turn them into ghosts. And the doctor says, even a ghastly future is better than no future at all. Because the Fisher King's like, you're not able to change the timeline. Like, I'm still going to destroy and kill everyone. He's like, well, even like having a shitty future is better than being turned into a freaking ghost. But he uses the word ghastly, which is, I think, interesting because it comes from the same kind of lineage as the word ghost.
Yep.
Which is interesting because he's like actively railing against the Fisher King, I guess, unnaturally killing these people to turn them into ghosts. But he still uses the word ghastly future.
Yeah.
Just like an interesting choice of words.
Is that all? Yeah. So speaking of like interesting choice of words, again, going back to this like Deridian like stuff that I've been looking up for this episode, like I found out in this like mind-blowing way that like, you know, the word revenant, like for ghost, it's like, yeah, that's actually like the etymology of that is like revisit, like, yeah, which is really like, man, wow. Goosebumps right there. R.L. Stein's Goosebumps.
All right.
Anyway, I had a ton of quotes because I wrote down all the cards that Clara provided for the doctor because they were pretty funny. But first I have one from Moran. He got to have a pretty cool quote before biting the dust. So Bennett is wondering, Bennett's like, this ship couldn't be like a weapon that the Army just kind of left here. He goes, you think the Army would just lose a prototype weapon? And Moran goes, you're new to the military, aren't you, son?
Yeah, it's like that time the U.S. accidentally dropped a nuke on itself when we were really lucky that it didn't go off.
It's like that time the U.S. like disposed nuclear waste like irresponsibly in the ocean. Oh wait, that was like many times and it's still going on. Haha, my bad.
The losing the nuke story is pretty... It's humorous in retrospect because it's like they just been like tied down or something that fell out of the plane. But you have to wonder like how many people in the nearby town like metaphorically shit their pants when they found out like an undetonated nuke landed like a couple miles outside of town.
It's like that. There's this like, it goes unreported like pretty frequently, but there was this like nuclear blast in Spain like over some pretty populated areas, and it's like really affected people. Like barely anybody knows about it, but it was like a mid-air nuclear thing.
Gotta cover it up, man.
Yeah.
It's like that prototype fighter that the U.S. developed one time that used unguided nuclear missiles, this air-to-air combat. And I was like, what general signed off on this?
Is that the U.S. made this like handheld nuke launcher?
I don't think it's related, but I wouldn't be surprised.
And the thing is, this launcher, the blast like, or what's it called? The effective range is like large, or like what's the term?
Wouldn't the blast radius of that like wipe out the person who used it?
Yeah, the blast radius is longer than like the effective range of the weapon. So like if whoever uses it like for sure is gonna die. That's why they like didn't go forward with the plan.
That's why they didn't go forward.
Also,
with the
it was
plan.
like a 400-pound missile that you had to like hold and shoot. That's also why they didn't go through with the plan.
And the U.S. developed some weird stuff. Soviets too, we just don't know about it because they were classified beyond belief.
Anyway, on with the rest of the quotes. So these are getting into the cards that Clara has written for the doctor to like say in different situations. So I completely understand why it was difficult not to get captured.
That's not the worst apology in existence. It's not like, I'm sorry I did something wrong. It's like, I'm sorry you feel that I did something wrong.
He's not saying sorry. He's just acknowledging that he understands why you suck, essentially. We have, it was my fault. I should have known you didn't live in Aberdeen. Is it a reference to Sarah Jane? I think that's a reference to Sarah.
That's another reference Toby Whithouse is throwing into this episode.
Man, really sneaking him in, Toby. That was on screen for like a second. We have, I didn't mean to imply that I didn't care. Again, not an apology.
That one's more of an apology than the other one, though. Like, at least in that one, he acknowledges he did something wrong.
And finally, we have a blatant lie. No one's going to get eaten, vaporized, exterminated, upgraded, possessed, mortally wounded, turned into jelly. We'll all get out of this unharmed.
Wonder what that turned to jelly's a reference to.
Yeah, that's a good question. Pritchard didn't get out of anything unharmed, nor did Moran.
Okay, but Pritchard wandered off before the doctor even used the cards, so he's free.
O'Donnell died.
Yeah.
We have one from the doctor that I mentioned already. Surely just being around me makes you cleverer by osmosis. This is when he's getting mad that nobody realizes what's going on. Pretty close proximity to that quote as well. Everything I solve, just more questions. Also from the doctor. I like that one because it tied into like the doctor finding out information and this information like warfare type thing. We have my ghosts will create more ghosts from the Fisher King. Meme ghosts there. And finally, we have the other one I said before. You can't just go back and cut off tragedy at the root because finding yourself, yada, yada, yada. I said it earlier in the episode.
Yeah, now we get the meme flow analog.
Yeah. And you didn't have anything, right? I had one with the 12th Doctor being awkward where Clara tries to high-five him. And she says, don't leave me hanging. He just kind of like grimaces and walks away.
Good old Doc. He hugs her in Magician's Apprentice, which is familiar, we forgot to mention.
Yeah,
like,
so
willingly.
Should we have like an anti, does that even out? Should we have like an anti-awkward, like, doctor count?
That was still awkward, though, because Clara wasn't ready for it, and she's like, oh, we're doing hugs now? And he's like I said, it's a great way to hide your face. So
I guess that is 12th Doctor being awkward.
The 12th Doctor being more alien. Anyway, that concludes everything I have on Under the Lake Before the Flood.
Yeah.
They say before the flood in the first episode, because the Doctor's like, we gotta go before the flood.
Finally, we've become the Before the Flood.
Finally, we've become the Superman for the quest for peace. Anyway, if you'd like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorative.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Toby Whithouse. I tried to write Whithouse into my notes and it autocorrected to White House, and I was like, no. Anyway, that's just a final anecdote for you.
Why you gotta turn autocorrect off and the red squiggly line off. Red squiggly line like makes your spelling ability diminish quickly.
Makes me second guess myself a lot.
No, as soon as you see the red squiggly line, you know it's wrong. You gotta memorize this stuff.
You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. Find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Trust Your Doctor. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next time, we're going to be watching
The Girl Who Died and the Woman Who Lived.
But until then, the end.